It is a wonderful pleasure to welcome Bernadette Connors to this show. She's a country musician from Ontario, Canada. Bernadette, welcome. How have you been?
I'm well. How are you?
I'm doing okay. So,
Good.
how have you been preparing for winter over there?
Oh, all kinds of ways. I've got my winter tire appointment,
Oh, okay.
right? So I've got those tires to get on so I can safely get to shows through the winter. Um, as well as just kind of reaching out and firming up bookings. Yeah. How about yourself?
Um, Steadily, I say. I have a lot of work to do since I'm doing school and the end of semester is coming, so I'm a bit rushed at the moment.
Yeah, I can imagine. I can
Yeah.
imagine. Must be feeling the pressure a little bit.
Oh, yeah. There are
Yeah.
tons of assignments and some exams to do. So,
Yeah.
mhm. Um, are you excited for Christmas?
I am. Yeah. We've got a little window of 3 days that we have blocked off, my partner and I,
Mhm.
to try to rest and connect with family. So that'll be really nice. How about yourself?
I'm quite the same. My cousin who lives here with me in Budapest, his wife recently gave birth, so I'm an uncle now.
Oh, congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that must be, so is that your first of being an uncle?
I've had my cousins gave birth to like children before, so
Yeah, okay.
but
Cool.
this is the first time that I met like any of my nephews and nieces
Yeah.
when they're first born.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. So I intend to see the family and the baby this Christmas, I suppose. That'd be one
That'll
of
be
my
nice.
Christmas plans.
Nice.
Yeah, so speaking of your partner, I know that you wrote a song called You and Me on the Rock. Everyone can listen to it on Spotify.
Yeah,
I
we
know that
we
his name is.
covered that. So I released it's a cover. So
Oh,
there's an artist named Brandy Carlisle that I really love,
okay.
and we heard her song and I said I feel like this is our song, and it turned out we just happened to record it. We didn't plan to record it, but a friend of ours said, "Hey, I'm going to learn more about running a studio. Would you come be our my little practice project?" And it happened to turn out really well, and we played this song that we really love. And after Dan proposed, I said, "Well, why don't we put it out and see how it goes?" And people have really received it well, which is great. It's a song that we love. So,
Awesome. Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm guessing this Christmas is gonna be you and Dan spending time together.
Oh yeah, yeah. Plus time with our families, which will be so nice. And there's a charity Christmas show in Hamilton that we
Mhm.
kind of made a bit of a tradition to go to. So we've got tickets for the J.R. Diggs Christmas show again this year too.
Okay, that's wonderful.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, if you don't mind me asking, tell me about the proposal.
Oh, it was, it was kind of spontaneous. There's this beautiful little waterfall near the place that we just moved to in August called Smoky Hollow Waterfall. And I uh I love walking there. So he just happened to be off one morning from work and we said, let's go for a nice walk. So we went for this walk and he got me down into the river, into the rapids of the waterfall, and I was kind of splashing around with joy, and he got down on one knee and was shaking and then said, he didn't even ask, he said, "I want to marry you." And I said yes. So it was kind of spontaneous for him, which was out of character. He's very planned.
Mhm.
However, I know he spent a lot of time planning to propose because he made the ring by hand
Oh,
and
wow.
he had started making it in secret as early as the spring in May or April, I think he said. So I know it was a long time coming and he knew he was going to propose a long time before I knew.
Mhm. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So is rig making part of his profession?
Not really, no. I think it was even his first crack at making a ring, but
Oh,
he's
wow.
he's he does home renovations and works with wood and carpentry. And then, yeah, he had just kind of made this beautiful wooden ring out of purple heart and leopard wood.
Hmm. All right. So
Yeah.
I first heard of you through Jessie T. She
Yeah.
recently released a new EP, which I think is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. She's
So
a great artist.
yeah, she is. And I got her on this show too, and that's how I came to know her.
Yeah.
So tell me about how you came to know each other.
Oh, well, I moved to Hamilton in November of 2021. It's a bit of a long story, but with the intention of like I moved from the small town of Georgina, which is about 2 and a ish hours away, depending on traffic. And so I had never really connected into the music scene out this way, Hamilton, Cambridge, Kitchener, that whole scene. And I actually met Jesse's good friend Katie Topham first at a writers round show we were doing with Dave Woods. And that was in the April of 2022 that I met Katie. And it was through meeting Katie and then playing Katie's album release party that Jesse was playing at Rural Roots Brewery in Elmira. That's where I ended up meeting Jesse. And then we started to chat a little bit and get to know each other. And I think we really hit it off. So I have a lot of respect for Jesse's talent and her hard work. She's very dedicated.
Hmm. Yeah, and it shows too in her music.
Absolutely. Absolutely, it does.
Yeah, and Jesse also introduced me to Katie Topham, which I talked to not so long ago. She's
Oh,
also really awesome.
yeah. Katie's great, eh?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah, and one thing I really love about Canada, and I've lived there for 4 years as an undergraduate, is that every town and every city is so far away from each other. So
Mm,
you need like a car or something to travel across, like even the province, really.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting when I talk about them being 2 hours away, right? I moved 2 hours away from my hometown, and it feels like a completely different group of people to
Hmm.
meet and get to know and share music with. Um, and I just find that it's so funny because today, like I reflect on friends who live where I used to live came to Hamilton last night and they were playing, and how much I love them and have been inspired and motivated by their talent. And I think being a part of a scene and getting to know the people and having those connections can be inspiring and motivating. So definitely getting to know Jesse and Katie and other great musicians in this scene has made me go, oh, okay, this is how we build a career. This is how we build having a life as an artist, for
Hmm.
sure.
So did your decision to move based on music, or were there other factors playing into it?
That's a great question. It was literally just a feeling of I had recorded my album in Hamilton in 2020. And so I spent 2 weeks during the pandemic locked down in an Airbnb, and then I'd go to the studio through the day and then I'd come home at night. And I remember just loving how that felt. And it's so funny because I talked to my mom yesterday looking back on the decision to move, and I said, I can't even really, like, I can tell you now all the logical practical reasons why this was a great move, to connect into a great city, but I couldn't have told you back then what my logical practical reasons were. It was really an emotional feeling that said I want to be in this city doing music.
Hmm.
So it was definitely career motivated because Dan, my partner, he works in renovations. He can do that anywhere. Not that it's easy to build a company in a city that you don't know anyone in really. But we took it on together and it's working.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So looking back on the decision to move, do you find that it is a right decision as time goes on?
100%.
Hmm.
Um, every day I get validated. Not to say that Hamilton doesn't have its struggles, but I'm kind of really glad that I didn't come into it with any preconceived notions of what Hamilton would offer me other than a place to work hard at my career. And I say it like that, not to over glorify busyness and hard work, but to validate the blue collar musician, the person who's playing the clubs and the bars, like Jesse and Katie and myself, and saying you can build a career that is sustainable in this city. And I didn't even realize how accurate that statement was until moving here,
Hmm.
for sure.
Nice. Yeah. It's it's rare, I think, the feeling that when you go to a place where you are not born into, that you find that this is the right place for me.
Mm. It's interesting you say that because like, it wasn't all easy, especially like 2021, we ended up in lockdown, right? And we weren't able to go anywhere that Christmas. We weren't able to see our friends and family. And that also is speaking to the where the climate was for bars and venues that I would have gone out to play at. They were closed down or limited capacity for a big bulk of the time that I would have spent, if you will, like grinding and building. I spent at home trying to figure out like Twitch. And I felt like I could have done that anywhere, not in necessarily in Hamilton, but something inside of me said, when things open up, it will get easier. And I remember the March of 2022, literally calling my dad in tears, thinking, why did I leave the family business, right? I was a voice coach at my family's music store. Why did I leave my community when none of it's working? And I was bawling my eyes out. And my dad quoted a band, an old band, one of their songs, a band named Tower of Power. I don't know if you know Tower of Power at all,
I do
but
not.
they have
I mean,
they have a song called "Don't Change Horses in the Middle of a Stream," or "Don't Change Horses," and it means stick to the plan, right? And my dad was like, "Give it a year, like just stick with it," and that was the best decision of my life. Which again, it wasn't easy. It was really hard, as you were alluding to. But I started to make strategies on how to feel not alone. And part of that is just going to the same coffee shop every day and saying hi, right? And part of that was um, trying to find opportunities to volunteer or give back to the community. So I still continue to try to find those ways to not only fuel my career, but build a community and great relationships, if that makes sense.
mhm. Yeah, it does. So, I would say arguably the bigger decision that you've made is to pursue a career as a musician. So, tell me about the moment when that became clear to you that
Mm.
being a musician is what you want to be.
It's interesting. That's a great question. But it's also kind of interesting because there wasn't ever one moment. I would say there's constant tests of that decision. So the first time I was in grade 10 and I wanted to quit school, and partly because I was sucking at math,
Mhm.
and partly because I knew what I was already good at, which was voice coaching and performing. I was already teaching at my family's music store. I had lots of students who loved their singing lessons, and I was already going out and setting up sound equipment and performing at the age of 15 and 16. So grade 10 was a big year of me going, this is my thing. At the end of high school, I was validated. It was like, yes, I'm going to pursue this. And that was 2006. I graduated. 2009, I made a big decision to like live in my van and record an album in my basement and for 2 months and bust across Canada. So there's all these little stamping points where I felt like I'm going to pursue this and this is how I'm going to do that. And I would say another point would have been 2012. I put out an EP and I got a tattoo and I was like, I'm doing this. And now at 35, I still find myself redeciding or reaffirming the commitment to this career because it's there. I could always quit and get another job and do like a more normal life. But I would say, like, from 2021 to now, I've learned so much about how I want to feel and operate in this industry. And so there's no stopping. if that makes sense. But yeah, I would say there isn't like one moment it's like I bet you in 5 years I'm going to feel it again, or
Mhm.
have that decision that's validating the choice to continue to work at building this. Yeah.
So you mentioned getting a tattoo. Would that happen to be the one in your wrist, on your wrist right now?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
yes. Yeah, I've got a few, but that one I got specifically when I got this tattoo, I said, I'm always going to be an artist. I will never have to apply for a job and hide my tattoo because this is my job.
Hmm. Awesome. It it kind of looks like, if I look at it correctly, a heart mixed in with what the musician term is a clef, right?
Yes, yes. Yeah, there's two different clefs, a bass clef and a treble
Oh, right.
clef.
Yes.
And the treble clef is upside down to
Uh-huh.
make it look like a heart.
Yes, I can see that.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
very
wonderful.
cool. Great eye.
Thank you. Yeah. So I wonder if so this another question would be, since we talk about Jesse and Katie, how important is a peer group, or at least the existence of peers who are doing the same things that you do, help you with your own career?
Yeah, that's a great question. I just got chills while you were asking because, in particular, both Katie and Jesse have kind of, um, I would explain it as like dug me out of a negative headspace at times. And I feel like at times I've called them up and said, "How are you doing?" And we do a check in. And if you're just focused on your career and it's just you and you're like, I'm going to get these fans and I'm going to do these posts and I'm going to play these shows, and you never talk to your peers, it can be very isolating. And I believe that that's partly why sometimes one of the factors that causes a mental health slide for an artist. And so, again, when I first moved and I was like crying to my dad on the phone in March, it was that April, a month later, that I met Katie. And I remember like feeling like I finally met someone because I had met people, but they weren't my people, if that makes sense. And I felt like when I met Katie, I had just met someone who would get me and get my heart and get my mindset and what motivates me. And I remember watching her promote her album and get it released inspired me to do a project, and I could pick her brain about how she approached things. So it's and Jesse's even offered like, "Hey girl, let's like have coffee sometime and just chat if you ever need to talk." So, I think a peer group is highly underestimated on how important it and is the reason you feel less alone in an industry that can sometimes feel isolating.
Yeah, and I wonder if the motivation or the idea that, being a musician is the right call. I know it can come and go, right? But
Yeah.
can you remember the most recent time when you've sort of like become dispirited in the musical process, and then something or someone help reigniting that passion again?
Yeah, that's a great question. Um I was really having a hard time in the spring, and I was looking at my career to save me. I wasn't in a great living situation. It was just my partner and I renting an apartment that was affordable but very not um not conducive to good living conditions. That we were constantly dealing with bed bugs and cockroaches all the time. Which was definitely like so new to me that the first time I saw a cockroach, I was like, a city bug. Like I had no idea. I know. And then on top of that, the building had a lot of encampments around it. It was a safe neighborhood, so it was tough loading in at night as a musician. So I think from moving that building from November 2021, and we moved out at the end of July, there was a window in the spring where I just wanted something to happen in my career so we could afford to get out of that place. And I remember I went to a co-writing session with the gentleman who produced my last album, John Angus. And it wasn't really anything in particular that he said, but it was the song we ended up writing called White Magnolia. And the idea being that, you know, I'm on the bridge, and it's like a suspension bridge in a windstorm. And on the other side of that bridge is the dream, is the destination that I'm trying to achieve. And so that was probably I was in a darker space than I would even have liked to admit. Like if you had asked me then, hey, do you have any doubts in your career? I probably would have been like, nope, right? But now that I'm through it and feel like we have a great apartment, we're in a great spot just outside of Hamilton and Waterdown now, and it's a safe community. I'm so comfortable here that nothing has to save me. The career doesn't have to be anything bigger than what it is. So I would say that, yeah, in the spring, it was kind of almost despairing. Um, but then things started to shift when we changed our home life to a safer, cleaner, more sustainable environment.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So you mean this spring?
Yeah. Yeah. Like this past spring.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So does that entail like a moving of houses or like a renovation of your current or old house?
We moved from a building in like right downtown Hamilton to 15 minutes. We just 15 minutes from where we were living is safer, cleaner, and we actually ended up finding a spot that we're actually saving money. So we really lucked out with what we found, but yeah, we had to move for sure.
Okay. Okay. And I can say that I myself had a difficult time in spring too. Um,
Hmm.
I was in Vienna, Austria in my previous school, and it didn't go well for me. So I guess I did something similar to what you do and move to a different city and go to a different school. I think it
Mm.
worked out for the better for me.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because I think we don't realize the impact of the energy that surrounds us with where we live,
Yeah.
right? And you don't really know how that's going to feel until you do it, right?
Mhm. Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
Um, there are certain places where I've lived where I could feel incredibly lonely and alienating, and I think Vienna was one of them. It's a
Yeah.
beautiful city though, and it's a shame that I felt that way about it.
Yeah. 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 Timing is a weird thing sometimes too, right?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, tell me about your upbringing in your hometown, if you
Mm.
don't mind sharing.
I don't mind. So I'm the youngest of four kids. I have three older brothers. Growing up, my parents' house was a really interesting house because it was a house, but it was a commercial space, so there was actually room for businesses to rent underneath the house. So there was like if you go down the side street, there was the business part of it, and then above it was the house that I grew up in. So we had a newspaper that my dad worked for renting half our basement, and then the other half was where my dad's music store was. So my dad would work and run the paper through the day, and at night he would teach music lessons. So it was interesting because I got a up close look at what my dad and mom would do to build the life we had. I could see how hard my dad worked, how hard my mom worked to keep the household running for my brothers and I. And access to music was something that we never had resistance to. There was no barrier. There were number of music teachers in the downstairs of my house, and I could take lessons whenever I felt inspired. I never took lessons regularly. It was always kind of off and on with different teachers to fill different curiosities. And then my mom and dad also ran the church choir. So growing up, I would go to church even at the age of 2 or 3, and my mom would put me on the pew to reach the microphone to share it with her. And I remember watching her mouth because I couldn't read the words to follow the shapes of the words.
Hmm.
Um, so that's I think a big part of my core memories is singing at church with my family. The joy I felt around music, it was always a joyful experience. And then at varying ages having different band projects with either my family, my uncle, my godmother, watching my parents' band play, and then also playing in a band with my brothers, or other kids at the music store. So it was definitely a community experience. It was definitely, inevitable that I would love music so much because my parents and family really instilled that.
Hmm. It is wonderful and interesting how music can both be a communal and a personal experience at the same time. I think it kind of depends on whether the music that you grow up with is played via a machine player, i.e., speakers or CD players and such, versus when it is played live by humans.
Mm,
And I suppose I grew up with music being played around the house, but it was mostly via machines. And eventually, I would grow up discovering my own music taste. And I think I've sort of become more introverted in that regard, in that I discovered my own music and I play them on whatever device that I have at that time. So currently, it's my phone. But yeah, um,
yeah, I find that very interesting because you're right that a listening experience can be very solitary. And I relate to that too, like finding an artist that I really enjoyed that I could get lost with. You can't get lost when you're surrounded by other people's energy the same way, right? And yeah, it's so interesting you kind of make that comparison because I mean I also know highly introverted musicians who would say that playing and expressing themselves with the music is only their experience. And to the point where they don't even want to get on stage. It's just about their experience. So and but that seemed foreign to me because of how I was raised with music, and it was always, I mean, I would go into a room and write by myself or, learn, play by myself, but there was always the end goal of being able to join everyone or share what I wrote with my dad or my brothers or my mom. Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, I think when you look at the history of music, it's a public forum that became more private over time, and with the advent of technologies and such. And in many ways, it can be a very good thing, but it does reduce its original purpose, which is to connect people.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. But I even heard recently that too much meditation
Mm.
can cause that isolation and rumination. So I think it's interesting because music can be very meditative as well, and therefore isolating and disconnecting at times, right? And causing more internalization. It's definitely a balance that some people, like for me, spending more time meditating and alone, not a bad thing. I'm highly social. But for someone more introverted, maybe they need the flip side of that, right?
Yes, yeah, I totally
Mm.
agree. I think my favorite music is the kind of music that you said that your favorite music is the one that you can get lost with.
Mm-hmm.
Mine is to take me away from the feeling of being lost because
Mm.
I often get lost in the what we call the real world often.
Mm.
I often find myself with no real sense of direction. And the fact that I listen to some of these musicians, they show me, for example, bands like REM or Radiohead. Um,
Yeah.
they show me that there's something wrong, peculiar, in particular with being lost because other people from the other side of the world felt the same way. And if that's the case, then because they have so many fans, right? I know that there are people across the world too, like who I haven't met, who feel the same way as I do, and that's a
Hmm.
comforting feeling.
I just got chills because you just made a really great point. And I've said this to students when they talk about writing sad songs.
Mm,
And I remember a young girl was in one of my writing workshops and she said, "Oh, I don't want to write songs that are too sad. I feel like the song I wrote is too sad." And I said, "There's no such thing as a sad song or a wrong feeling to express. Because if you express it, then the person listening to it who has the same feeling feels less alone."
mhm,
So you actually make the exact same point. It's true.
mhm. Yeah. So, regarding country music, so what is the special appeal that country music has to you?
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of walk the line of country, rock, blues, in that sense. But I would say, um, when I go to play music or write music and it comes out sounding, like I could play it with Katie and Jesse, I would say, what I love about when that music comes out is it's very it's very instrumental. It can be, especially older country, it can be very, I've got my guitar and I've got my bass and I've got my drummer, and I love that energy of I've got my acoustic guitar, and it can be upbeat, it can be moving, it can be serious, it can be fun, it can be flirty. And so I wouldn't necessarily stick that to just country because I love opening it up to, hey, let's riff on this until I blow the lid off of this place in this Zeppelin cover, right?
Mhm.
So I would definitely say when I look at the genre of country blues and or rock, there's a lot of room for riffing and band like jamming and rocking out, and that energy, that visceral energy, is something I really enjoy the release of.
Wonderful. Yeah. So tell me more about the recording of this song.
Whole lot of love.
Yeah.
It
All
was that one was really impromptu, because I was doing a show in Hamilton at a venue called the Casbah, and I had the opportunity to kind of record it, and I didn't even realize when I booked the show that the venue was set up in a way that we could line into the board and get a live recording. So we set up this setup so we could live record the whole show. And then at the very end of the show, we get encored, and I end up, my producer who's at the show, John Angus, I end up inviting him up to play. And I had actually told my other guitar player, Stu, like, have an extra guitar and amp just in case J.A., John Angus, wants to get up with us at some point during the show. If he comes, like. So him being there, us getting encored, I literally walked off stage and was like, "John Angus, you want to get up with us? We're playing a whole lot of love." And he was like, "Sure, put me in." And so I would say it's a very organic, rock expression of energy and just kind of having a time on stage with a bunch of pals, for sure.
Wonderful. Yeah. I'm a big fan of Led Zeppelin, and frankly, your cover blew me away.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind. Yeah, we had a lot of fun with it, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, they are such a wonderful rock band. I think
Mhm.
I get chills every time I listen to one of their songs.
Yeah. Yeah, great band. And so fun to throw my voice around singing that stuff. Wah!
So, your album, Monarch, I believe was the title of it, was
Yep,
released during the pandemic, and
it
you recorded
was.
it during the pandemic. So was
Hmm.
it intended to be a pandemic project?
No.
Okay.
Yeah, we had started crowdfunding it and getting people behind it in January. And John Angus and I met before the pandemic in February to get to know each other and see if we could jam. And we did that. And then we had talked about getting into the studio in April. So we were planning to get into the studio in April. And then the pandemic hit and everything got locked down in March. And we weren't actually allowed to get into the studio until we got in June 2020. And that was like when they were reopening things in Canada, and it was like phase one reopenings, this is what's allowed to happen. So we were only allowed a certain number of people in that size of space at a time, and we had to be able to be 6 feet apart and wear masks and sanitizer. And I just remember, and we were the first project in the studio since all those protocols got put in, so it was very surreal, and very different to record in the pandemic. So it was not intended. Most of the songs were written before the pandemic, except for the song called Make It Through, track number 10, which John Angus and I hopped on a Zoom call and started writing it 9 weeks into the pandemic. Yeah.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah. So, what was the inspiration behind the album's title?
Mm. Well, the album really represents a point in my life that was transformative at the time. So each song represents, a shift or a mindset, or a realization that I had about myself or life or a decision. So track number one, Run Wild, was all about me embracing my kind of energy and saying, I'm going to be myself unapologetically, for example, right? The song All the Way to Nashville was written at a time way before 2020, when I had thought about moving to Nashville and realized that wasn't the right move to write my authentic story as an artist. So every song has its own little backstory like that, for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. So, in regards to being yourself, is that something that you had to learn, or is it something that you've taken intuitively?
Mm, I definitely continue to learn more about who I am and learn more about how to show up in this world wholly myself. And I would say it's a lifelong journey. Um, I feel like I kind of had it maybe intuitively, um, at certain points in my younger years, right? But then I know certain life experiences would make me kind of question if that personality trait wasn't more of a liability than something to love about myself. Um, for example, even my outgoing nature, at times it's gotten me into trouble, it's gotten me hurt. So I definitely work on understanding that not everything um, is about like adjusting because I got hurt and I learned something. So a lot of what I'm doing now in my 30s is learning almost unlearning what's hurt me and saying it's okay to get hurt, it's okay to get messy, it's okay to fail, and don't let that change who you are. I would say that's so. As I get older, I'm learning not to change based on negative experiences.
Hmm. Yeah. So I tend to think, based on what C.S. Lewis says about like how you can you can retain some of your childlike qualities without being childish.
Mm.
And,
Oh, yes.
I don't have the quotation with me, but I think you can find it. I'll send it to you after.
Yeah, please
But
do.
yeah, but yeah, I think that is I don't think you can be fully grown up unless you found a part in your childhood that you can really appreciate, or
Mm.
you can find the person that is the child you, and appreciate that about who you are. And that certainly took me a lot of time, and I think I'm still having to find that there were certain parts in my childhood that weren't as bad as I made it out to be. Like
Mm,
I wasn't trying to outgrow the child anymore.
I love that. Yeah, and I think you're on the money with that, right? Like um even Bernadette in grade 3, or grade 2 would get in trouble for singing in class,
Mhm,
right? And that's just like what felt so good all the time. I'd be writing out my math questions and singing it. But other people were annoyed by it. It wasn't necessarily the most respectful thing to do to my peers. As an adult, um, like the other day, I was at the convenience store and I was like doing the pin pad thing, and I was like, approved. That's all I said. When it went through, I was like, approved. And everyone in the convenience store laughed. And I don't care if they were laughing at me or with me. I went, that's okay. It's okay to sing approved when your debit card goes through at the convenience store, you know? So, I think that there's the unapologetic way of yeah, I'm not going to sit in a test if I'm writing a road test, I'm not going to sing my answers out loud anymore. But I'm definitely not going to apologize for singing in the convenience store, you know.
mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's wonderful. So yeah, so on that topic, what's your favorite part about being a child?
Mm. Huh. What one of my favorite parts was the curiosity, but the freedom to be curious and present. So, if my mom like I have a great memory of my mom being in the garden and me being out there with her, and I'm just like watching the ants, you know? And I loved watching the clouds, and I loved picking flowers and probably singing out loud while doing all of it, you know? And that to me was a lot of freedom, and I would say um I still try to make time to have experiences like watching the clouds and picking flowers because it grounds me in that freedom. Even though I'm an adult and I have responsibilities, I would say not having to worry about that stuff and just being free to observe nature and be a part of life in that kind of uh, unoppressed place was definitely one of my favorite things about childhood.
Mhm. Yeah. So I wonder if do you figure out the person that you are? And we've talked about like being yourself and such. Do you figure out yourself based on the activities that you do in solitude or with company?
Mm. It's definitely both because people are a mirror, right? So, um, I love learning a new skill. And when I was younger, I would like jump in and just try it and get messy. Now there are times where I like working with someone who knows what they're doing, right? So one of the things I love about Dan before we even started dating is I said I always wanted to get more into rock climbing. So as friends, we would go rock climbing. I wouldn't necessarily go by myself, not because I needed someone to make me comfortable, but because I would have had to hire a coach kind of thing to get good at rock climbing. Whereas Dan would take me and we'd have a great time, and he knew what to coach me because he had a lot of experience with rock climbing. Um, Another example would be like um canoeing with my brothers. I wouldn't necessarily go in a canoe by myself, but I loved canoeing with my brothers when I was 15 and going on camping trips. They're all older, so I'd be allowed to go with them and we'd camp together. So, those are activities that are cool and different and adventurous, but I wouldn't necessarily do on my own.
Hmm.
However, sitting down and writing a song, I loved doing that alone first before co-writing.
Understood.
Yeah.
Yeah. So since we are approaching Christmas, um, are there any good Christmas country music songs?
There's a there's a song by the Eagles that I really love. Please
Hmm.
Come Home for Christmas.
Hmm.
That one is one of my personal favorites. And growing up, we would listen to the Dolly Parton and Kenny Rogers Christmas album. It's my mom's favorite, and I've incorporated one of the songs off of that album into my show that I do at Canada's Wonderlands. So, yeah, definitely inspired by Dolly Parton's Christmas album, and it's a good one to throw on and bake some cookies too.
Hmm. So I wonder if you listen to Christmas music outside of Christmas time.
Oh, no,
Hmm?
no, I don't.
Let's see. Yeah.
That's it.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like my brother who's living with me right now is the only person that who does that. Yeah, so
There's got to be one other person.
I'm sure, but right now, like in the realm of people that I know, my brother is the only one that does that.
Yeah.
Hmm. So I wonder if family has ever become a topic of inspiration for your music.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, being the youngest in a musical family meant that I was always shown first,
Hmm.
right? So I saw my mom's love of Carole King, my dad's love of Chicago. Um, my oldest brother was really into like the Tea Party. My brother Dave, second oldest brother, took me to see the Trews live, which is how I ended up being inspired by my now producer John Angus, who plays in the Trews. And my brother Joe is a Great Big Sea fan, so it was a beautiful thing to see all these people play instruments and work out the music they love, and then perform it and make it their own. That had to have affected me more than I even realize.
Hmm.
For sure. I will say that I for a long time still, when people ask me what my influences are on a personal level, I would I very much would more quickly reference one of my brothers or my parents' artists before I had like my own. It was only as of recent where I started to really go, yeah, Katie Tunstall is a big inspiration for me, and she's an artist that I discovered that on my own. It wasn't anyone in my family that listened to her. So I would say that being the youngest had its pros in a lot of ways because I could get shown, but also kind of made it challenging for me to find my own voice in music at times.
Yeah. So how do you embark on that process of finding your own voice?
Interesting. Well, part of it is just listening to artists and asking yourself if you like it.
Hmm.
And we have these emotional relationships with songs from when we were younger that maybe other people showed us, but we don't necessarily have um our own sense of self within that. So I kind of would say look at the music you listen to from the age of like 17 to 22, and in that age range, what artists did you discover on your own, and how did those artists inspire you? That's where I would go with it.
Hmm. Well, I should probably catalog the artists whom I've discovered in the age of
Yeah.
17, 22.
Yeah,
Like, there
and
were
listen
plenty of
to
them.
it. Right? Listen to it now and go, which one would you always go back to now because you still love it?
Mhm. Of course. Yeah. So how do you keep I guess how do you maintain the excitement, so to speak, of discovering new music?
Mm, hmm. Um, well, I mean, staying curious is a big part of it for sure. Um, and for me now, at this point, one of the things I love is when um I go to a show. Going to a show to discover an artist, like I knew of Iron Maiden for years and years and years. I know Iron Maiden. I know they exist. But when I went and saw them live at Hamilton this past October, not the one that just happened, but a year ago, Dan and I went with a friend of ours, and it was at that show that I realized like how much an authentic delivery of music can attract a demographic of generations, like we talked about earlier. And at that show, I was like, I love Iron Maiden. Like, you would never guess, but I just had such a deep appreciation. And I think it's because there's nothing like you can, sure, there's special effects you can do live and blah, 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 but you really ultimately, especially for someone who's musical enough to see when things are being produced for a live show versus like happening, like everyone's playing and using that energy, I would say going to a live show is a great way to discover an artist, to sum it up. And because you feel the artist's energy in a totally different way.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's what I did last week. There's a well-known rock band that I've heard of for years, Hailstorm with Lizzie
Okay.
Hale, that came through to Budapest, and I bought tickets to the performance like a month or so before, and it was amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I should check out their music, of course, in my free time.
Yeah. But what I would say is when you look at their music, you're going to be brought back to that concert experience, right?
Hmm.
And you're going to be reminded of how you felt in that environment. And I think that's why discovering an artist live can be such a great experience.
Hmm. And what about seeing concerts of artists that you've already familiarized yourself with?
Mm, mm. Amanda Marshall is an example of that for me. I grew up loving her music. My older brother introduced me to her, and I had all her albums and I was singing along. And I went to see her live for the first time this past June, and I literally cried the whole show because of how I was just overtaken. Like, it wasn't like, oh, I'm sad. It was like, oh my God, what is this experience I'm having? And I knew most of the music, and her voice was so on point. It was like, it was better than the album, it was so human. So, yeah, I would say that that's an example of an experience I had with an artist that I loved for 20 years.
So we started off touching on your personal life a bit, and I wonder, have you found a way to, in some ways, not let your personal life as well as your life in music interfere with one another?
It's interesting because I would say I'm relearning what that looks like. So, in my 20s, from age 21 to 25, I was married to the guy that I played in a band with. And then I got divorced at 25, and then I started dating a guy that I played in a band with. And so I would say I didn't even understand how that wasn't going to work. But the interesting thing is now Dan and I have spent more time building our relationship than, say, playing music together. Though we do it in contexts that are fun, not necessarily contexts that are like, hey, I've got this show. Not that the shows aren't fun, but I would give him he'd have a list of songs to learn, and he'd have to go sit in the office by himself and do some homework. Whereas, me saying, hey, let's do one song on a whim at an open mic I'm running is a very different feeling. So, especially because him and I are both professional musicians, though he focuses more on his renovations at this time because of the pandemic and that business having taken off for him. So, um, but what I will say is maybe I swung the pendulum too far the other way, and Dan and I are learning to kind of bring it to the middle together because I kind of was really adamant about keeping my live, my band and my relationship separate. And Dan's always been very supportive of that and no ego around it, no insecurity, which has been great. But I always make sure we have the conversation of, for example, I've got all these jazzy Christmas tunes I'm doing at Canada's Wonderland. Dan, would you want to do that with me? No, you're really busy with your renovations right now. Okay, maybe we'll talk about it next year. So now I'm kind of keeping that door open, if that makes sense. Whereas before I was kind of rigid with it.
I see. So, from your personal experience, what makes Dan a good partner?
Hmm. He's patient. He's um he truly listens. I've never been with someone who has been so open to seeing not just all the great qualities I have, but embraces and empathizes with my not so great qualities. He's not black and white about it. He's very open and flexible. Um, he teaches me to have more self compassion for sure. Um, and he's very secure in himself. And that's especially in a male dominated industry where I'm constantly working with dudes. I've had guys in the past, they're jealous, they're this. Dan is so secure in himself. It makes it easy for me to be able to go out and do my career and work in a male dominated industry, and he knows I'm coming home to him. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
So, two final questions. One, who would you like to tour with?
God. I would love to open for the Trews, but don't tell them that. I would love to do that. I'm a big fan of their music and I love playing with them and working with them, so I feel like that could be a riot. I would also love to tour with Amanda Marshall. Like after watching her live show, I think part of why I was so moved was because I could see a bit of myself in her, and I feel like that would be an amazing experience.
hmm Final question. What does music mean to you?
Mm. Music is one of the few art forms that kind of expresses not just visually but audibly. It's a whole energetic experience. So for me, music is definitely connection, and it's definitely authentic expression. Um, Without music, I would not have the sense of self that I have for sure.
Well, on that wonderful note, thank you very much, Bernadette Connors, for joining this program.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you.